My name is Amelia Rhodes, and the first thing they noticed about me wasn't my qualifications, or the fact that I'd kept the company compliant for nearly 9 years. It was my accent. Not loud mocking, not openly cruel, just the quiet kind that hides behind smiles and friendly jokes. Say that again. Matt laughed during my first meeting with him. I love how you pronounce regulatory. A few people chuckled. I smiled back, because women like me learn early that silence keeps you employed longer than dignity. I was born in Eastern Europe, raised on precision, paperwork, and rules that didn't bend just because someone higher up felt important. English was my second language, compliance was my first. Still, every time I spoke, someone corrected a word I hadn't asked help with. Every time I sent a report, someone rephrased it without changing a single fact. They called it team culture. I called it practice. Because while they were busy polishing their jokes, I was maintaining something they never bothered to understand. A license. A quiet, invisible authorization that sat behind every contract they bragged about. Every shipment. Every approval. Every dollar that kept the lights on. They thought I was just the woman with the accent. They never asked what would happen if my name disappeared from the system. And I never volunteered the answer. The jokes didn't stop. They evolved. Once people decide you're different, they get comfortable testing how far they can push it. It started with comments in meetings. Amelia, can you slow down even when I wasn't speaking fast? Or, I'll rewrite this so it sounds more natural, as if clarity had an accent problem. The worst part wasn't Matt. It was the way others followed his lead. A junior analyst mimicked my pronunciation under his breath once. Loud enough for laughter. Quiet enough for deniability. I looked straight at him, waited until the room went still, then continued my presentation like nothing happened. That kind of calm unsettles people more than anger ever could. They began excluding me from informal decisions. Meetings moved without calendar invites. Slack threads forgot to include me. I found out about changes after they were already live, like I was a guest in a house I'd built myself. Meanwhile, Matt introduced himself as the modernizer. Fresh thinking. Lean operations. He loved phrases like streamlining redundancies, and every time he said it, his eyes flicked toward me. Toward my desk. Toward my accent. What none of them noticed was what I was doing during those long, quiet afternoons. Updating timestamps. Verifying renewals. Cross-checking authorities across regulatory portals most of them didn't even know existed. They thought I was being sidelined. I was actually making sure every thread still ran through one place. Me. By the third week, the disrespect became official. Matt rolled out what he proudly called a role realignment. A glossy slide deck full of arrows, boxes, and words that meant nothing if you'd ever survived a real audit. He spoke fast, confident, like speed could replace understanding. When he reached my department, he paused just long enough to make it feel intentional. Some functions, he said, are more supportive in nature. We'll be redistributing certain legacy responsibilities to create agility. Legacy. That word again. He didn't look at my resume. He looked at my accent. After the meeting, my system access changed. Not removed completely, just trimmed. Read only here. View only there. Subtle enough to seem accidental. Obvious enough to send a message. When I asked IT, they blamed a permissions update. When I asked HR, they told me to speak with my manager. Matt smiled when I mentioned it. We're simplifying things, Amelia. You don't need to worry about the technical side anymore. That night, I stayed late. Not out of fear. Out of habit. I logged into the federal compliance portal using credentials that had never been shared, never documented, never questioned. My name still sat there unchanged. Primary license holder. Sole certifying authority. Every renewal clock still ticking under my responsibility. I opened my contract and reread a clause I'd memorized years ago. Not because I planned to use it. Because I liked knowing exactly where the floor was. They were rearranging chairs. I was still holding the building. The next change came quietly, the way corporate decisions always do when they don't want witnesses. My calendar access vanished first. Then my approval rights. By Friday, I was copied on emails instead of addressed in them. Observing my own work like it belonged to someone else. Matt framed it as efficiency. "We're freeing you up to focus on documentation," he said, like documentation was a retirement home for skills. At lunch, I overheard two coworkers at the espresso machine. "She's nice," one said, "but you can tell she's not really scalable." The other nodded, stirring foam like it was wisdom. I didn't interrupt. I took my coffee back to my desk and updated a renewal schedule instead. That afternoon, a vendor emailed asking for confirmation on a shipment that required a specific compliance signature. I replied politely, copied Matt, and signed it the way I always had. 5 minutes later, Matt messaged me directly. "No need to handle these anymore. Forward to operations." I forwarded it. Then I opened my private ledger. The one I'd built years ago after watching another company collapse because no one knew who actually held authority. 41 active licenses. All linked to my name. All dependent on continued employment status and a clause no one ever bothered to read. I didn't feel angry. I felt calm. Because when people start moving you out of the way, it usually means they've forgotten why you were placed there in the first place. And forgetting is expensive. The meeting invite came at 9:17 a.m. Subject: quick alignment. Duration: 10 minutes. 10 minutes is never 10 minutes. It's a warning shot. I walked into the glass conference room and found Matt already there, laptop open, smile practiced. HR joined remotely, two faces in small boxes, both avoiding my eyes. No introductions. No small talk. "Amelia," Matt began, folding his hands like he was about to offer condolences. "After reviewing departmental overlaps, we've decided your position is no longer the best use of resources." I waited. Silence makes people rush. "This isn't about performance," he added quickly. "It's about fit. Cultural alignment." There it was. The polite version of "you don't belong here." HR slid a digital document across the table. Termination. Effective immediately. No transition period. No severance worth mentioning. Just a space for my signature and a cheerful line about wishing me future success. I read it slowly. Not because I was shocked, but because I wanted to enjoy the timing. When I reached the final page, I signed my name once, clean and steady. "I'll need a printed copy," I said. Matt blinked. "It's all electronic." "I know," I replied. "I'd still like a copy." When I stood to leave, my phone vibrated. A notification from the compliance registry. Status change detected. Employment termination logged. I smiled, thanked HR, and walked out without looking back. They thought they had just ended my job. What they'd actually done was start a countdown they couldn't see. I didn't go home right away. I walked 2 blocks to a quiet cafe where no one knew my name or my accent, ordered a tea I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. Not to panic. Not to apply for jobs. I logged into the one system that still recognized me without question. The National Licensing Portal doesn't care about office politics. It doesn't care about buzzwords or culture decks. It only cares about authority. And authority, inconveniently for them, was still mine. I reviewed the timestamp of my termination. Precise to the minute. Then I opened my employment contract and scrolled to Section 7C, the clause I'd flagged years ago after a compliance seminar everyone else skipped. In the event of involuntary termination, all company-paid regulatory licenses tied to the employee's credentials shall be subject to immediate revocation. Not suspension. Not transfer. Revocation. I initiated nothing yet. I just verified the pathway. Checked the dependencies. Confirmed the countdown windows. Some licenses had a 24-hour grace period. Others had none. All of them required a certified holder to remain active. I closed my laptop and finally took a sip of tea. Across town, Matt was probably celebrating efficiency. Sending emails about next steps. Telling himself the company would be lighter without me. He had no idea the system was already marking their files in yellow. And yellow always turns red. The first alert didn't come from them. It came from the system. An automated email slid into my inbox at 6:42 p.m., polite and emotionless. License dependency check complete. 3 entries flagged. Status: at risk. I didn't smile. Not yet. I'd learned a long time ago not to celebrate before the math finishes. By the next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a former colleague. Then another. Messages without questions, just confusion. Hey Amelia, do you still have access to the compliance board? I can't log into the dashboard. Is it down for you too? I didn't answer. At 10:11 a.m., a calendar invite was accidentally forwarded to me. Operations Emergency Sync. High priority. Matt's name at the top, bolded, followed by words like irregularity, temporary disruption, and my favorite, unexpected dependency. Unexpected is what people call things they chose not to understand. By noon, a vendor rejected a routine approval request. Nothing dramatic. Just a clean refusal. Certifying authority inactive. That single line carried more weight than all of Matt's presentations combined. Somewhere in the building, someone finally said my name out loud. Not with an accent joke. Not with a smile. With urgency. And for the first time since they'd mocked the way I spoke, they were listening very carefully. By mid-morning, chaos had begun to whisper through the office. A procurement request flagged as incomplete. A vendor call unanswered because no one held the proper authority. Emails bounced back with automated alerts, certifying officer required. Panic was subtle at first, the kind you feel before you hear the scream. Matt's posture changed. He wasn't smug anymore. He walked the floor, muttering phrases like escalation protocol and dependency error, glancing at screens that refused to cooperate. He still didn't know it, but every system he touched was quietly reminding him who controlled the keys. HR tried to intervene, sending gentle reminders about protocol and termination processes. Their emails vanished into automated loops, bouncing back with polite rejection messages that mentioned only Amelia Rhodes, the name they had dismissed, the voice they had mocked, the accent they had laughed at. I sat at home, watching the thread of alerts in real time, sipping my coffee, calm as ever. Every missed approval, every delayed shipment, every error notification was a small, quiet confirmation. The license that kept them running was mine. Their ecosystem depended on me. And I had already decided to simply watch. By the end of Part 8, the office was no longer just uncomfortable, it was vulnerable. And I was perfectly ready. By the afternoon, whispers became questions. One junior analyst approached Matt, stammering over a request to approve a shipment. The email system rejected it. Matt's fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to type. Every protocol he thought he understood now demanded a name he had erased from existence. Mine. Calls to HR went unanswered. Their automated replies referenced Amelia Rhodes and a terminated employee. Panic spread like a virus through the floor. People glanced at each other, realizing the invisible thread holding operations together had disappeared. I watched it all unfold through the notifications pinging quietly on my personal device. Each alert was like a domino falling. I didn't need to intervene. I didn't need to explain. Every error, every bounced email, every stalled vendor shipment was a lesson in oversight. Matt had assumed authority could replace knowledge. He had assumed my silence meant weakness. He had assumed that an accent was a flaw. He hadn't assumed patience. He hadn't assumed foresight. And he certainly hadn't assumed Amelia Rhodes would simply sit back, sip her coffee, and watch the house of cards collapse. By the time they realized the scope, it was already too late. By late afternoon, the CFO called an emergency huddle. Matt entered the room, visibly tense, glancing at every screen as though they might provide answers themselves. He cleared his throat, attempted calm, but the tension was palpable. Questions flew from department heads, approvals delayed, vendor shipments blocked, audit trails incomplete. Every inquiry led back to a name that no longer appeared in the system. Amelia Rhodes. I stayed home, watching alerts ping across my private dashboard. Each error, each blocked transaction, each unanswered email was a tiny victory. Not loud, not vengeful, just precise. Every dependency they had relied on had my signature woven into it. Every system, every license, every approval route, all tethered to me. Matt's confidence faltered. His modernization buzzwords became nervous stutters. HR's scripted reassurances fell flat. Operations staff whispered, then panicked, then froze. Amelia Rhodes, the accent they mocked, the woman they ignored, was now the silent anchor of the company's survival. They couldn't move forward without me. And they didn't know it. By the time they realized it, the office had shifted under their feet. Authority isn't just a title. Authority, when built carefully, lives in systems, in contracts, in someone who knows exactly how to pull the right lever at the right time. They learned this lesson slowly, painfully, publicly. By the evening, Matt's panic had reached upper management. Emails flagged high priority, calls routed with urgent in the subject line, yet no one could complete a single task without a certifying signature. Each system bounced back the same message: Amelia Rhodes required. My name had become a bottleneck. The very thing they mocked, the accent, the meticulous attention, the quiet diligence, was now the only thing keeping operations from collapse. I didn't intervene. I didn't reply. I watched as people floundered, realizing slowly that I was more than a voice. They depended on my authority. Every license I controlled, every approval I had issued over the years, became a chain they couldn't break. Every compliance check, every renewal, every document required the one person they had dismissed. And while they scrambled, I sipped a cup of tea at home, calm, collected, observing from the quiet. Patience is the ultimate weapon, far sharper than anger. Theirs had been hubris, and it was unraveling precisely because I had built systems stronger than their assumptions, smarter than their shortcuts, and faster than their panic. The office that had mocked me for pronunciation, for being different, for being meticulous, was now paralyzed. And all because they underestimated Amelia Rhodes. By nightfall, the company's systems were quietly failing. Automated alerts lit up dashboards, approvals queued indefinitely, and scheduled audits flagged noncompliance. Every process I had once managed flowed through pathways they didn't understand, now frozen without my intervention. Matt was on every call, pacing, muttering to anyone who would answer, yet nothing moved. He had deleted me from email chains, removed my access to internal tools, assumed authority could replace experience, and every single assumption was failing spectacularly. I stayed at home, quietly monitoring the cascade. Each ping, each rejection, each system block was methodical. They hadn't realized that I wasn't just an employee. They had underestimated the infrastructure I had built, the checks and balances embedded in every license, every renewal, every document. By midnight, 3 of the vendors called directly. They asked questions no one could answer. Someone finally said my name aloud with reverence, not mockery. Amelia Rhodes. The woman they had ridiculed. The woman they thought was powerless. And suddenly, she wasn't. The following morning, the panic had escalated. Managers wandered the floor, emails unanswered, systems rejecting approvals left and right. Every chain of responsibility looped back to me. Amelia Rhodes, the name they once mocked, was now the linchpin of their entire operation. Without my signature, every license-dependent task stalled. Matt tried delegating. He tried shortcuts. He tried workarounds and alternative approvals. Every attempt bounced back like a boomerang, politely informing him that authority could not be faked, that compliance could not be skipped, and that Amelia Rhodes had set the rules long before they ever entered the office. HR issued reminders. IT attempted emergency access resets. Operations scrambled to salvage vendor shipments. But no one could override the system I had built. The intricate web of licenses, renewals, and approvals was perfectly intact, with one missing element: me. I sat at home, watching alerts ping in real time, sipping my morning coffee. Calm, collected. The people who had ridiculed my accent and dismissed my knowledge were now entirely dependent on it. And dependency is a quiet, relentless kind of power. By mid-morning, the CEO's office was in full-blown alarm mode. Reports piled up on desks, vendors called repeatedly, and compliance alerts pinged endlessly. Every thread traced back to one missing link: Amelia Rhodes. They had erased me from email chains, terminated my access, assumed the system could run without me, but every process depended on my credentials, my decisions, my foresight. Matt scrambled. He emailed IT, HR, legal, everyone, but no one could solve the problem. The approvals he needed were invisible to him. The dashboards refused to update. Vendors waited, shipments stalled, audits queued. Authority without knowledge was worthless. And I watched. At home, calm, sipping tea, observing the chaos unfold like a slow-motion domino chain. Every missed approval, every system alert, every halted transaction reminded me the people who mocked my accent, my methods, my attention to detail, had underestimated the quiet power of preparation and patience. Amelia Rhodes, the voice they ridiculed, was now the axis around which their entire operation teetered. By late afternoon, the company was unraveling. Alerts blared across dashboards, approvals sat in limbo, and vendors were left hanging. Every single system I had once managed was now a silent testament to the meticulous structure I had built, and they couldn't navigate it without me. Matt and HR attempted damage control, but every effort collided with the unyielding truth. Amelia Rhodes controlled the licenses, the approvals, the authority. The woman they had mocked, the accent they had laughed at, was now untouchable. Every error, every halted process, every compliance alert reinforced her invisible grip on the company's operations. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Power doesn't announce itself. It exists quietly, waiting for the right moment. By evening, the CEO's office was in emergency mode. Vendors called repeatedly, and the board demanded answers. My name floated silently through every conversation, a ghostly reminder. The person they dismissed, underestimated, and mocked was the one keeping the company alive. I poured a final cup of tea, smiled, and let them discover the cost of arrogance and underestimation. Amelia Rhodes had won not with rage, but with patience, precision, and authority they never understood.